Hello and welcome to the Treasury Talent Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Lynch. Today's brought to you by the Association of Finance Professionals. The association has kindly got together one of their board members, Ferdinand Jahnel, who is the Treasurer of Marsh McClelland. I'm going to interview Ferdinand today and really just wanted to cover the usual stuff, but definitely brought to you by the Association of Finance Professionals, and can't speak highly enough of the collaboration we've been doing with them in recent times. I hope you enjoyed today's chat with Ferdinand. Welcome to the podcast, Ferdinand. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Hello, Simon. My pleasure as well.
Now, I always ask my guests, Ferdinand, what made you choose Treasury as your career, and how did you end up in Treasury?
Yeah, so I've been in a professional business environment for almost 30 years now. So I started working back in Germany in 1991, and for the first 10 years of my career, I worked for a large German machinery conglomerate, the MAN Group. For those of your listeners that live in Europe, you see MAN trucks and buses driving around all over Europe. But also they had a big diesel engine business. They still have it. They had a big printing machinery business that they sold off later. And in general, they just made big industrial machineries. And I started as a trainee where they gave me the opportunity to start at the holding company in Munich, in southern Germany, in corporate finance, more particular export finance. And later on, over a course of 10 years, I ran through different roles that included cash management, treasury for a US-based subsidiary, actually. Where I spent 2 years at the East Coast. Then I was in controllership back in Germany. And then I finally ended up in Chicago working for a captive financing company providing financial services for clients. And I decided to go back to business school and get my MBA. And fortunately for me, the University of Chicago, what is now the Booth School of Business, accepted me. And I went through their program. I knew that I wanted a career change after that. That was that great opportunity for me to do that. And as I started to work for American companies, I just ultimately ended up on the Treasury track, initially working for Steelcase, which is a big office furniture company, global company, running their international treasury center out of France. So you hear a common theme. I crossed the Atlantic a few times back and forth. Later on, I took an opportunity to become assistant treasurer of a software company that was named Computer Associates at the time, later transformed into CA Technologies. And just 2 years ago, I think they were bought out by Broadcom. So I spent actually 3 years at CA, and then I got an offer to become treasurer of a healthcare distribution company called Henry Schein, based on Long Island in the East Coast, where I spent 7 years during a very interesting time period where the company basically doubled its revenue size from about 6 billion to over 12 billion. And then in 2015, I accepted the offer from Marsh McClelland, my current company, to run the global treasury function that's based in New York, but also has a second team in London. I've been there ever since, so a little over 5 years.
And you're also on the board of the AFP since 2012.
That's correct. Yes. So I've been an AFP member since I believe 2005, and I would frequently go to their annual conferences. I would go to round tables that they would offer, in particular in the New York City area where I was residing at the time. And I got to know more and more folks within the organization and the management and some of the board members. And when the opportunity arose, I raised my hand and applied, and they accepted me. And yeah, I've been on the board ever since, but I will actually roll off this October since there are term limits. So I'm reaching the end of my term, and that's going to be the end of it after 8 years. A great experience.
Ferdinand, how would you say that being on the board of the AFP has benefited you?
Yeah, I would say mostly in two ways, Simon. First of all, the AFP offers a lot in terms of knowledge, in terms of training courses that are just extremely helpful for the financial profession, especially on the treasury track, and that it has also expanded over the past 4 or 5 years or so on the FP&A track. So there's a lot of learning that you can just do through what the AFP has to offer, and not the least is the certification. I am a certified treasury professional, And I have always encouraged members of my treasury teams in the various companies that I just mentioned to also go through the certification. There's an FP&A certification that the AFP has developed also as a first really in the industry. And the second thing in particular than being on the board and interacting with other board members and certainly with the AFP management also is just the dialogue with professionals that oftentimes face similar challenges that you do, albeit maybe in different industries and different businesses. But you can compare notes. You can just ask your colleague, well, how did you resolve that problem? How did you deal with your bank group in this situation? How did you deal with the rating agencies? Or how did you handle that accounts receivable challenge or something like that? And that has just always been extremely fruitful. I think we are right now 14 or 15 board members from very diverse industries, some for-profit, there's a handful not-for-profit, and that just is, it has always been extremely rewarding, just the people aspect. And certainly helping the AFP management also with our experience and our guidance to run that organization and keep it on that successful track that the AFP has been on for a long, long time.
It's just a really easy way to network and build relationships at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all there for you. To me, it's logical for those listeners who aren't involved in any association. It's a really easy way for you to get out there and network and build relationships. Absolutely.
And, it is the largest organization in North America and actually in the world for Treasury and FP&A professionals with a global reach, and that makes it very, very unique. There's not, to my knowledge, there's no other organization like that has the depth and the breadth of all the offerings.
Ferdinand, you mentioned earlier, you've moved around a lot. You're what I define as a global citizen. So obviously you worked in Germany and France, as you mentioned, and the US. How have you found that process, and what are the cultural differences in the work cultures across these different continents?
Yeah, I have to say that over those almost 3 decades that I've gone through my personal career, I've gained a lot of experience in working in an international environment. Starting, as I mentioned, with a very German company that was very engineering focused and really struggled with dealing with its US-based subsidiaries because the mindset and the culture in the United States was quite different. And as soon as I was on the other side, actually, the Germans viewed me as an American. And that was kind of old style management that I experienced in that company that later on, when I went through experiences with these other companies, became much more multifaceted, much more international. I mentioned France when I worked for Steelcase, actually in Strasbourg, which is in Alsace on the border to Germany. The working environment was extremely multicultural. I was German, obviously, there. There were French people there, Italian people. There were other Americans. And you would deal with, the European organization all the time. And it was extremely rewarding to working together, making a business work and successful with the help of all these different people that have different backgrounds, different nationalities. But we always found a common thread in working together. And I would say that experience continued and later with Computer Associates, with Henry Schein, very international companies. And now, of course, Marsh McClelland. We are over 76,000 people in over 130 countries on all continents around the world. We are basically everywhere where our clients are. And you need to have an open mind. You need to embrace that the fact that there are so many different people from different backgrounds that work together and ultimately follow a common goal. Just case in point, Simon, my team in New York, where I have about 22, 23 people, they all come from different backgrounds, and I don't mean just Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan. No, there are people from Russia, there are other people from Europe, there are people from Latin America, there are people from an Asian background, and it works. It works fantastically well. Everybody is very respectful and treat each other in a very collaborative and compassionate way. And I have to say, the past 5 years have been extremely rewarding in that respect, and that's something I enjoy. I enjoy working with people that are very diverse.
I personally am a massive fan of, being a global citizen. And I think it's subtle differences between, nations and countries in the way that they work, but all really important in terms of in developing your own EQ. So is there any specific advice you would have to listeners around being a global citizen?
I would say the key is just to have an open mind. And I go back to my first experience for the German company that I've worked initially, where people would come to America on a business trip with very predetermined opinions about the country and the people there. And if you look for something that fuels your stereotypes, yes, you will find that, there's just fast food and there's, cheap beer and whatever. You will find this. But in the same way, Americans had stereotypes about the Germans on the other side, And if you keep just your existing mindset, that bubble that you grew up within, then you will never be able to dig deeper and actually see the nuances that exist in every country around the world. And that there is such a richness in culture and knowledge and just the opportunity ultimately to learn for yourself in digging deeper and having that open mind. I think that's the most important message. And therefore, I would always encourage people when they are looking for a career advice, or they have to choose between, a career opportunity that's very local or another one that gets you somewhere else in a different location, but maybe is a little bit riskier. I would say go for the little riskier opportunity, because it has the opportunity to be much, much more rewarding.
You mentioned career, and you've given us a great overview of your career earlier on. What would you say have been the career highlights in your mind so far, Ferdinand?
I have to say I'm extremely happy where I am today. I work for a great company. I have a great team. I work for a great CFO, I have to say that as well, and just a great management team of the company overall, and that is important. I mentioned earlier how happy I am with just the diversity of my team, and I really enjoy that. I would not want to go back to a different environment where people are very local and are not willing to look outside into the bigger world. I would say that I'm kind of living my dream today, and I hope that this will still go on for quite some time. But all the other steps before were stepping stones upwards always. And sometimes there were harder ones, and sometimes there were easier ones. But the key is to work your way through and ultimately have a vision where you want to be longer term, and never give up in pursuing your dream.
Would you say that Treasury differs between the industries that you've worked in, or is it fairly similar? I can't say that word. Similar across all of the industries you've worked in?
It's an interesting question, and I've heard that oftentimes when I explain to people, where I have gone through in terms of my career choices, my experience is Treasury revolves around similar questions from one company to the next in terms of how you manage banking relationships, how you manage treasury operations, how you manage the capital structure of the company, foreign exchange, rating agencies, things like that. In every company that I worked for, we had to deal with these questions, but you have to answer them in the context of that specific business setting. And then the priorities will shift and become different. So initially I worked for a manufacturing company. So cash management was very much in the context of cash conversion cycles. How quickly can you collect on your receivables? How can you manage your vendor payments? How do you manage inventories? Then I worked for a software business that basically sells immaterial goods and services, and we generated a lot of cash all the time just based on very long-standing service contracts with large mainframe clients. And there the question was not so much how to generate the cash, but rather what are we going to do with all that cash? How do you manage the capital structure in the context of we want to do M&A, we want to pay dividends, we want to do share buybacks, And we certainly want to reward our people also. So it was more about distribution of that cash. At Henry Schein, the healthcare distribution company, again, it was very much about managing the cash conversion cycle, managing inventories. But that company itself was not a manufacturer. They are a distributor. And so Treasury had to basically support that business model in that way. And now with Marsh McClelland, again, it's the same questions with respect to managing the long-term capital structure, managing cash flows, and looking at the constituents that support the business, which is not just the clients and the employees, it's also the investors, it's the debt holders, and it's certainly, you know, the society at large. We are a very, very big player, and whenever something happens in the insurance world, chances are Marsh or one of our other businesses is involved. And so I would say, again, Treasury covers all these aspects that I mentioned before, from, you know, very operational issues to more high-level capital structure issues. Now, what I actually have in Marsh McClelland in addition is our global pension commitments, which are very significant, deriving from defined benefit plans. So that's the world that I live in today. But again, it's not that dissimilar in the general context of what Treasury usually provides as a service to the finance organization or the company at large.
But now, what has been your approach to networking over the course of your career, and what advice would you have to the listeners?
Yeah, I think outside of your specific company or business setting, find opportunities to network with peers in your local community or in the local city that you live. I did that certainly to a great extent ever since we moved back to the United States. I think that was in 2005, and have been part of the greater New York City kind of finance environment. I certainly I have always networked with the banking community at large, because the banks are our partners to achieve many things that we need to do. And then certainly use networking opportunities through finance organizations such as the AFP and others. And if there are unique opportunities, such as, you know, a board position that I was able to participate in over the past 8 years, do it. It's a fantastic opportunity, and just be outgoing, be open-minded. And certainly there are other, you know, online portals, without naming any names, that are certainly providing networking opportunities as well.
And I think that the AFP, it just provides that easy platform, doesn't it? I'm a big believer that networking is about what you put in equals what you get out. And if you go into it thinking you'll help others, then it definitely, you end up benefiting yourself. But I just think the platform of the AFP to be able to do that, you know, in a red environment makes it quite easy. The other question I've got for you there is have mentors been a part of your career, and how have they helped?
Yeah. So I've typically worked for large organizations where there were pretty robust HR systems or initiatives in place that allowed you to have access to a mentor, which typically is not your direct superior, but it's somebody within the organization at large, typically senior, who can provide you advice in terms of making decisions that relate to your position, but certainly also to your next career moves. And I had the benefit of meeting several people along the way that helped me and ultimately helped me to identify opportunities, especially very early on when I knew I wanted to go international and see more than just Germany. And that was extremely beneficial for me right from the beginning to embark on that journey that ultimately got me across the Atlantic Ocean a few times back and forth. And I would say typically large multinational organizations, they're probably better set up to have these initiatives already institutionalized than small to medium-sized firms. But mentors are always, I think, a very useful, I don't want to say tool, but they are very helpful for especially people in the early part of their career, because they can share their experience, they can share what they know about the organization, or if they have seen other parts of the world, they can help you also in getting your mind around that. And I would say, lucky that I met several people that guided me quite well, especially in my early years.
Ferdinand, if you were to go back and be able to have a conversation with yourself at 25 as you were starting your career, what's the one piece of advice you wish you had have known back then that you know now that you pass on to listeners?
I would say be always ready for surprises and then remain flexible. Don't stick to a specific dogma just because you thought at 25 my career path has to be absolutely linear and I want to be there when I'm 30 and I want to be in that position when I'm 35, and at 40 I've reached the pinnacle. Be open-minded and be prepared, because there will be surprises. Just to give you an example, when I graduated from the Chicago booth, it was December 2001, right after the September 11th catastrophe, and the country was in recession. I actually thought maybe I'll try banking. I'm going to become a banker, a corporate banker. And typically these banks would come to campus and do their roadshows and ultimately, pick up people fresh from the campus. But at that time, they didn't even come. They didn't show up because they were firing people at the time, left and right. And so my grand plan of moving from a corporate career into a banking career basically faltered right out of the gates. And it took me a little while, but ultimately I obtained that opportunity to run international treasury for Steelcase. And my wife and I, we had no children at the time. We decided, all right, let's go to France. Why not? New experience, new adventure. And it turned out to be a fantastic detour. We spent 2 years over there, had a great time, great experience. But we knew ultimately longer term, we wanted to go back to the United States. And that's what we ultimately did. So be flexible, but certainly know what you want and never give up on your general vision, but be flexible along the way, I would say.
I love that advice. And the one thing for listeners out there is sometimes the best opportunities come from adversity. And like Ferdinand said, you have a career path, but the economy and bigger things are at play. And don't worry about speed humps. Don't worry about those adverse situations, because I think a lot of the time, my guests say that it's from adversity that the real opportunities come. Would you agree, Ferdinand?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's very true. And then you just, you keep working through it, and eventually there will be another opportunity. You just got to cast a wider net, and you will figure it out over time.
What is it that you look for when you're hiring into your team, Ferdinand? Is there anything specifically that you would advise for listeners?
It depends on what level I'm looking for. Generally, of course, people need to have a strong business acumen and ideally have a specific treasury background, because there's a lot of specific treasury knowledge that we typically require to just hit the ground running out of the gates. And many folks that are more finance generalists, or let's say they come from internal audit, or they come from financial reporting or FP&A, they are not geared towards a treasury environment that is actually operating quite differently. And that's a bit different. We improvise quite a bit on a day-to-day basis. We pivot and make quick decisions to do something different. And that's unique to Treasury, I would say. We are the lifeblood of the company that ultimately moves funds around on a daily basis so that the company actually runs. And that requires to be that flexible and adaptable. And that's sometimes a challenge when you don't have a specific Treasury background. But this is not to say that you can learn it. But ideally, I would look for somebody who has an open mindset, who is willing to learn, who is flexible and adaptable in this world, and certainly is open to finding a better way moving forward. That's what I always repeat to my team also. Even if we have a great software implementation that gives us all these added features and benefits, there's always going to be a better way in the future. This is not the end point. It keeps going on, and there's so much new technology coming to market now, whether it's from banks themselves, from fintechs, from software providers. We constantly need to be on the hunt to find better solutions out there, because the world is not standing still.
And that's a really good segue into my next question around technology is moving very quickly. How do you see the role of the treasurer changing with this technology advancement?
Yeah, so we are talking about that a lot internally within the finance leadership team of the company, and certainly our CFO as well. And the key is to be at the table as a trusted advisor to the CFO, and not just to him, but also to the CEO and other members of the executive management team. Case in point, so we were very concerned initially at the outbreak of this COVID crisis that we could potentially be impacted on the liquidity management side if our clients started to pay us later than they ordinarily would do. And we actually had seen that during the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, where the days receivable outstanding extended quite a bit actually at the time. And we feared that if this happens again in this environment, we are a much bigger company now as well, this could have a significant liquidity impact. And so we implemented a very detailed cash monitoring system around the world that I actually report up to the executive management every week, and where we track basically the cash reporting in all our key geographies on an ongoing basis. So that's just an example of being the trusted advisor to top management and providing basically that insight that makes business leaders understand what consequences certain business actions can have on liquidity management, on the capital structure of the company. And certainly, if things get really worse, they could impact support by the banking group, it could impact ratings and other things. So I think we have that very good dialogue going on within my current company. But that is certainly something you constantly have to earn on an ongoing basis also. And you have to stay vigilant, especially in very volatile times that we are living through today, that you continue to earn their trust. You can never take that for granted.
Ferdinand, that's fabulous. It's been really great chatting with you today. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Simon. My pleasure.